let's keep the questions firing in the chat. My role is to keep an eye on those questions and coordinate with some of my colleagues so that they respond to them either in the chat or if they are specific to what Nazim is doing, I will just flag that to him so that he can address it in his demonstration. Please ask as many questions as you can, colleagues. This is the forum to do it. And we are here to try and assist you to get across the line. Over to you, Nazim.
Thank you, Terence. I hope everybody can see the slide. Please shout. I'm trying to enlarge it slightly. Please shout, anybody shout if anything is unclear on the screen. So, as Terence has said, Muketi took you through the first part of the demonstration. We spoke to the activities, the sub-activities, and the outcomes that should be part of your submission. And I want to state that, as Muketi has said, there is a logical flow to the ABC. Okay? And if that logical flow is followed, it is a far less daunting prospect than it may seem if you look at the document as a whole. Now, of course, all applicants, they are the experts in the field that they operate. They are the ones that understand what those activities are, what the potential outcome of those activities would be, and finally, very importantly, what it would cost to perform those activities to get the desired outcome. So in that sense, I would encourage everybody to complete the first section of the activities, the sub-activities, etc. And only once that has been completed and makes sense that you proceed to doing the finance section. So the finance section is really follows that and is really a costing of what you have done before. Now, what would the jobs fund look to see when we look at it? The first thing we'd like to see is a budget or costing that is consistent with the project being proposed. So, for example, if we are proposing to recruit and place young people into opportunities, one would expect to see a large proportion of the budget to relate to activities to achieve that outcome. One would not expect to see heavy infrastructure costs, etc., which would really be more applicable to a different model. So there's got to be consistency with the project. Costs have got to relate to a specific activity. Where you have an activity and it's not costed, that will immediately be flagged to you. Because, of course, one accepts that nothing what one does doesn't have a cost. Everything, and again, as I said before, you guys are the experts in that, and it's for you to defrag and show us that so that we can also understand and learn from that process. The budget has got to be reasonable. There are certain value for money prescripts that we will be looking at both within the actual project as well as across the various applications. And in doing that, one has got to have clear assumptions underlying a particular cost. These have got to be supported by benchmarks. So that benchmark may be a quotation that you receive from a service provider. Alternatively, you may be paying for a similar type of activity.
Nazim, your audio is not clear. Just adjust your mic a little bit.
Is that better?
They're struggling to hear you.
Is that
yes.
better?
Yes, okay. Yes, I think that's better. Confirm, Tabisa, Stephen, just confirm. Okay, just maybe just rehash those first couple of points, Nazim.
Okay, so what would the jobs fund look at when we look at an ABC fund? The first one is one of consistency with the project. One would expect costing to be consistent with what you're trying to achieve. So, for example, if you're doing a recruitment and placement of young persons, one would expect to see a large proportion of that budget focused on activities to achieve that particular outcome. Okay. The second one is that cost must relate to specific. So, for example, if you look on the screen, if one is talking about advertising, one needs to talk about how many advertising you're posting, and the cost will relate to what you think you have to do to achieve what you have set out to do. The third one is
Nazim.
Yes.
There's a bit of bad background, sir.
Really?
Yeah.
Where I am is very quiet.
Just maybe move a bit closer to your mic. Let's give it a try.
Is that better?
Still got that a bit of background. That there's an echo there.
There's an echo. Let me just move, Terence, and see if it's better.
All right, let's give you a second.
Is that better, Terence?
Okay, I can hear you a bit louder. Let's give it a try, a couple of minutes. If not, maybe I can assist and drive this session with your assistance.
Fantastic. Is that better, colleagues? Is that better, Terence?
Yeah, I can hear you a bit louder now. So let's give it a few minutes, and then let's hear from the colleagues as well as you were speaking.
My apologies, colleagues. There's actually nothing going on around here. I don't understand what's going on. But anyway, so reasonability. So benchmarking is very important for costs. And that can be done in a number of ways. Either it can be via a quotation for a particular cost that you're incurring, or that can be related to costs that you are incurring currently. In other words, the experience in terms of what an advert, placing an advert in a newspaper costs you generally, and you will provide us with that type of information so we can assess the costs that you are incurring for reasonability. The fourth issue that I would like to raise is the one of an optimal grant being requested. So if your project requires a grant of 3.5 million as supported by your costing sheets, then we would be looking at that and saying, if you're requesting 4.5 million, then we would look at that and say, come back to you and say, you know, your costing sheets only support a request of 3.5 million. And we would then engage in discussions around that point and see where we end up with that. So the process of completing the finance section, let me first go through the architecture of the Pimp. So ultimately, this would be your final project budget. This is what we're aiming to complete. Okay, so we have an income section. It shows your grant, your match funding, your other income, your income contribution, etc. Below that, we have the actual expenditure. Now, this reads from the other sheet, so you don't have to do it auto-populated. But this is will ultimately be the end result of what you're trying to achieve. Okay, and you will notice there are various checks and balances in this sheet that will tell you if we have maybe overassessed something or we're short on cash, etc. That is the outcome. Now, I would suggest always that one firstly does the cost elements of your project, and then determine what level of income you require to do that, to fund that. There are two sheets here. The first one is the one that Mo was speaking to. The second one is the financing plan, which really is the income where you show your income that is required to meet the cost that is shown in the costing sheet, or the outcome cost as it's called on the tab. So those are the three key tabs within this ABC. Now, the costing sheet, which is where one would always start. So you have outlined, I can take you through, and I'm not going to go through all of the cost colleagues because it doesn't take too long. What I'm going to do is focus on a particular activity, sub-activity, output, and so forth, and then speak to the costing of that particular line item. So we are recruiting young people. Okay, we are placing to be able to achieve that. We need to advertise into the market so that we can actually recruit those young people. So we're talking about the number of adverts posted and the level of assumptions that speaks to why it is what it is. Okay. Then we have the 4 periods. Now a period is a quarter. We have 8 adverts in each of the first 3 quarters. Okay, so we will place 2 per quarter. Sorry, yeah, it's 8 per quarter that we will place. That makes a total of 24 advertisements over the project period. Now, the next step, once you've outlined what the activities are, what the outputs are, in this case, the 24 advertisements over the project period, we need to cost that. Now, if we move over to this section here, okay, we then have the cost description. It's advertising costs for ads placed in the community newspaper. Okay, the wording is not important. It's simply the wording needs to be such that one understands what we are talking about. We then allocate to the SCOA. The SCOA stands for Standard Chart of Accounts. Okay. We then allocate to the main level of activity, and you can see here these are the main categories of costs that one could incur: management costs, compensation, goods and services, which is where advertising and communication finds itself. So we allocate to cost and services, right? Then we allocate to the actual account that we incur into. And again, once you have chosen goods and services, the list in the drop-down box will show you the cost that is included within this goods and services category. You will see I1 being advertising, marketing, and communications, and you will see the various other costs that you may allocate to. The cost of this 24 advertisements would be 240,000. Now, again, these are numbers that we use in an example. You will insert numbers that make sense to you based on your experience, etc. So we've assumed 10,000 Rand for each, and you can see the calculation on top here. So the total cost of that activity is 240,000 Rand. The next step would be to show us when exactly that expenditure will be incurred over the project period. If I may take a step back. So we've now determined that our 24 advertisements is going to cost 240,000 Rand. What is very important for you then is to explain to us how that 240,000 Rand has been determined. Right? So your assumptions would be 24 ads placed per month at 10,000 per ad. And you could add here based on experience, based on current experience, etc. Or based on quotation, please see uploaded quotation. Okay. We then go across. Now, inflation, one would not expect it to be an inflationary impact or material one anyway over the project period. If there is, you will insert that there, and you will determine the cost based on what you expect that inflation to be over your project period. Now, we then require you to be able to determine what the funding flows for this project be. We determine you to disaggregate that total cost into the various periods that we will be implementing over. Now, you will see here, I've inserted 240,000 in period 3. Now, the total, as in column Z there, is 240,000. No problem, right? The problem is that when you laid out how you will be doing this, you said in period 1 we will do 8, period 2, 8, period 3, 8. which gave us the 24. One would then not expect to pay for all of these in period 3, unless, of course, you have extremely lenient payment terms from your suppliers. I don't think that's a reasonable thing to expect. So you will have to disaggregate that cost in when you will pay for it. So in other words, if it's 240,000 for 10,000 rand each, one would expect to see this. 80,000, 80,000, 80,000. Please note, total is still 240,000. There is a very useful error check in here. In column AB, if there's a number there, we know we have not entered the numbers correctly or formulas correctly. You will notice there's a financial risk. Now, where there is something that is open to, you've made an assumption on cost, right? But of course, we don't have clear line of sight of what exactly a cost will be in a year's time. In that event, where such risk exists, would you please require for applicants to tell us what that risk is? And we then see what mitigation we have for that risk and what level of costing we need to add to actually overcome that risk over time. So that is very important as well. And of course, that will all go into the way you would cost model anyway. So now we have inserted the cost for that. We first started with activity output of 8 advertisements every quarter. We said the total cost for those 24 advertisements would be 24,000 rand each, assuming 10,000 per ad. Right? That 10,000 rand was based on experience. It was based on a quotation from, let's say, the Sowetan, etc. We then broke down or disaggregated that total cost in the period in which it will be incurred, which is then period 1 through 3, which is consistent with having 8 advertisements placed per quarter. Okay, so we have 240,000 now. If I then go just to the SCOA budget, okay, we have the line 47, we have the advertisement. You will then see this will auto-populate from the costing sheet from 80,000, 80,000 there to your advertising costs. I hope that is clear. If we then move, for example, to another type of cost, I'm not going to go into too much detail with this, and that is salary. Now, you will notice that salary is contained in various activities. So you have a staff member who gets paid, let's say for argument's sake, 20,000 rand, right? That person is involved in recruitment, is involved in placements, is involved in whatever, right? So there's 4 activities involved. Unless for the purpose of this example, assume that this time is spent evenly across that. So you would then expect to see that person's costing to be 5,000 rand in activity 1, 5,000 in 2, 5,000 in 3, 5,000 in 4, to make up his total salary of 20,000. Now, of course, that then becomes very difficult for one to track, right? Because very often you do get the case where one person is involved in various activities in the organization. We would then request that you insert a salary schedule for us to say, I've got person number 1, staff member 1, who earns 20,000 rand a month. His time is spent on activity 1, 1, 2, 3, 4. Right? And it's 5,000, 5,000, 5,000. Okay. Then have number 2 and so on and so on. Then we get into of what is the allocation of those salaries to activity 1 in total. And in total, we look at the total at the end here somewhere. We will determine your salary bill per month is 100,000. Your cost allocation or usage for a month is 100,000. What one cannot have, from your perspective as well as ours, is that the cost you allocate to a project is 110,000, but you're paying 120,000, which means something there is not working from our perspective. We cannot have cost allocation of 100,000 but you're requesting the salary bill you give us is for 110,000, which means we're paying for an activity that is not related to the project. I hope that is clear. Please post chats in the chat. If not, I will gladly answer. Now, in terms of this, right, now there are various tabs at the bottom here where you have a cost that is made up of various components. Please feel free to insert however many sheets you feel necessary so that we can understand the various components of that cost. So, for example, if you move low, if we move lower down, right, we have travel costs. Now, there's one of two ways you can do this. You could disaggregate travel costs, because let's say you're doing a site visit in another province. You're either going to need a car or have to take a flight. You're going to need accommodation, you're going to need food, etc., meals, etc. Now, those estimating what those costs are and how you get a total number for each one of the three is different. So if you then insert a sheet, it's fine to say travel costs. If you disaggregate it and say flight costs, meal costs, accommodation costs, that's fine. Okay? But if you are aggregating, insert a sheet into this, and you do that by right-clicking, insert worksheet. There we go. So we go travel costs. And you will then outline all your assumptions around there on the travel cost, etc. When you get back to this line item here, you will simply say, please see travel costs tab, or you could say further travel cost sheet attached. So we understand we have to go and see there for a disaggregation of that number so we can better understand. So once we have completed all the cost items, okay, we will get that will be auto-populate into the scope. And you will see for period 1, my total cost is 2.252. That's a number. 1.9 million for period 2, again for 3, and almost 2 million for period 5. Now we're in a position to determine. So if that is our cost for period 1, what does the contributions from the various pools of funding, when I say pools of funding, I'm talking about the grant, match funding, etc. Okay? You then go into the finance tab, and that is how you do this. All right. You then move to the finance tab, as you can see. Various sections of the finance tab speaks to the grant funding, A. The match funding, of course, there are various categories of match funding. You've got your own contribution, you've got contributions from other sources, you've got loan financing, and then below that, you've got your in-kind contribution, which, if you bear with me, I'll come back to that now. Okay. If you then lower down, you've got other inflows. Now, those would be payment of recruitment fees the agreements you have with your placements, with your employees, your opportunity holders, fees that will have to be recorded there. That refunds, etc., interest income, so forth, will have to be included in that section. Okay, we have not necessarily applicable to this, loan repayments, other earnings. Other earnings would be, as I said, fees that you earn, VAT refunds, etc. Of course, one cannot legislate whether that would be, so you would have to provide us the details of what that is. Okay. Now, if I go back to my SCOA budget, you will see 2.25 as my cost for the quarter. Okay. I move back to the financing plan. I know I need 2 million. Now, what is the contributions from the various funding pools that I need? Of course, it's a 1:1 minimum match funding ratio. Okay, given that Advantage is a private concern, for-profit organization, hence the minimum match funding ratio is 1:1. I would then take the 2.2 million and say half of that then comes from the grant, which is 960, and half from match funding, which again is 960, right? Obviously split between own contributions or whatnot. Now, there is no need for this to be equal to your funding contributions from other partners. It will be determined from when you can draw from those various initiatives, and this is up to the terms of those fundings, as long as in total the match funding contribution mirrors what you have in the grant, from the grant, assuming of course you have a 1:1 match funding. So now we've got to a point where we're looking at our SCOA budget again, and we've got, I can show you, we've got the various funding pools there. That then covers the cost. Now you would remember that amended the 240,000 back. Okay. So if one then looks at the deficit line, 82 tells you in that quarter, I will have a deficit of 80,000. Now, of course, one knows, anybody will tell you that that is unsustainable. You cannot have a deficit. It's got to be funded from somewhere. We would then have to relook at what we say the drawdowns from the various funding. So you would take the 80,000 because it's 1:1. You would put 40,000, additional 40,000 into match funding, and additional 40,000 into the grant. So if we then go here and we go, say 1,261, 40,000 additional, not 40, sorry, no. It's my 40,000. I go there for them. So you can do it either way. You can do it there. You can do contributions, whatever is consistent in terms of the funding that you have. We've added 40,000 there, 40,000 into the match funding. If we go back to our SCOA budget, we will see at that deficit. Sorry, it's not 40,000. Okay. Right. We then have, go back here, and there we go. We have now, don't have a deficit, all costs are accounted for, all the entire budget for that particular quarter has been funded. Now, we are not for a minute saying that that number has to be 0. But of course, any surplus, so if you need R1 million and your funding is, let's say, 1.1 million that you're requesting, you will have a surplus of 100,000. Any surplus has to be reasonable. Right? The jobs fund or the funders, whether it's jobs fund or your match funders, is not in the business of providing a project with money so that it can be laid in a project bank account, earn interest rightly, but that's not the business. The business of funders is to provide funding to offset costs for that particular. So while there is allowed to be a surplus in there, that has to be reasonable. So if you go, we got 10,000 or 5,000 rand surplus, that would be acceptable. Of course, we can ask you why that should be, but it's a reasonable number. If it's R500,000 rand, given a 1 million rand or 2 million rand cost, then obviously the conversation then becomes very different. We would want to understand why exactly that needs to be there. But that is a discussion one has. So now we've allocated, we funded all cash. You bear with me, in the example, we noted that this project will contribute 1 million in in-kind contributions. Yeah. And there in your SCOA budget is your in-kind contribution of 1 million. So if we go to the finance plan, go down, there's a section that deals with in-kind contributions. Our in-kind contribution can be one of 4 types. It can be a service, asset that you provide to the project, the use of assets, or even the asset itself, materials that you would provide in the farming context, farming inputs, etc. And sponsorships, providing youth with airtime at no cost. That is a sponsorship, and that would then be included. Whatever category of in-kind contribution is, we will require the contributor, which in this case is Advantage. It doesn't have to be the lead applicant who does that. Whoever provides you something at no cost, you provide us with that contributor, the description of what that cost is. So in other words, what are you providing to the project at no cost? In this case, is the project management service. So Advantage is saying our management time that we're allocating to the project, our managers are already paid. We will allocate a portion of that to the project for free at no cost. The SCOA code is FA2, you will see that later. Now, very importantly for us to understand what that in-kind is and what impact it has, we need to understand the basis of valuation for that. Now, if one speaks to managers' time, then that basis would obviously be a time-based allocation. So, for example, manager A is going to spend 10 hours a week, 10 hours a period on this project. We then take that 10 hours and cost it based on what that manager is. Okay? The evidence for that would be submitted timesheets on a quarterly basis. So that timesheet would then say manager A spent 10 hours, this is what we're paying per hour, and that's the cost or the contribution towards the project. You will see for ease of just for understanding, we've simply allocated 250,000. And to go back to the SCOA budget, there is your R1 million, which is pre-populated directly with finance. Now, we know that an in-kind contribution is a non-cash item. Because this entire system is based on a cash-based accounting system, not the accrual-based, cash-based. Putting in or inserting a non-cash item, of course, will distort the project budget. Because now you have this in-kind, this non-cash contribution that is there, R1 million, but it impacts the cost, and it should, because there is no cost to an in-kind. What we require from is to insert the cost in the costing sheet related to that activity. So if one looks at the costing allocation sheet, we move down. That's right, apologies. We have a cost inserted that says project management cost, project administration. Allocated to management cost, again, I will show you the drop-down boxes. There are 5 categories of costs. In this case, it is management costs. The second category, of course, the account that we're actually talking about, to which it's allocated, is project service and administration. You will see the FA2 that I referred to earlier. The total cost is R1 million, and you will simply say it is based on time schedule submitted. And note that that cost is to be funded by an in-kind contribution. So if one then looks at the quarterly numbers, it's 250,000 per quarter, R1 million total, so that agrees. Please use the error check in column A, just to ensure that we have inserted everything correctly and all ties up. So going back to the SCOA budget, we've got our R1 million in-kind contribution under in-kind, and we have our in-kind contribution under FA2 management cost, project administration is our R1 million. So we have it on the income side, we have it on the expenditure side. Ultimately, there is no costs involved into the project. There's no cash impact in the project of that R1 million. So that is effectively what one would do in completing the costing side of the ABC Pimp, if I can recap. Only do so once the activities has been agreed upon. That has been finalized. Financial specialist would then determine the costs related to those specific. The budget has got to be consistent with the project model. The costs have got to be reasonable and supported by benchmarking, either via quotations or experience that you currently experience in, for example, the advertisements, what you're currently paying, that would be sufficient to support those costs. This entire finance section of the ABC Pimp is based on the cash basis of accounting. So where you get a stage where a cost has been incurred, right, in an accounting sense, but not paid, that then is not reflected in that particular quarter. It's reflected only when paid or expected to be paid. So those are the basic assumptions that one would do in terms of finalizing the finance section of the ABC. Terence, is there any specifically related questions to this section in the chat?
Not at the moment. I think they're absorbing your presentation. Maybe Nazim, I've just put in the chat there some, just a summary of some of the things you've been saying. Just maybe explain this issue around cash basis and link it maybe to the project requirement for the ring-fence project bank account. Why do we insist on cash-based budgeting and reporting?
Okay. Thanks, Terence, and thank you for the insight in the chat. Really helpful. Thank you. So, all government departments use cash basis of accounting. Right? What it allows you to do is to determine exactly what your cash requirements are for a particular period, and hence allows you to determine what your drawdowns or cash requirements are going to be. If one has an accrual system for it is, you accrue a cost which, based on your payment terms, you only pay 6 months into the next quarter. Meanwhile, we have large cash buildup in the project bank account, which is not to anybody in anybody's interest. Neither your match funder, neither yourself, neither I, because of course there's an opportunity cost to every cash drawdown that you do from the jobs fund, from your funders, out of your own bank account, etc. That is why cash basis of accounting is used, simply because it better aligns your requirements with the need for you to draw down from your funders. Now, how does that translate into the project bank account? So in effect, your bank statement is then what is actually being spent for the project. So in terms of reporting based on against the budget, you simply allocate every expenditure that's been accounted for in the project bank account that is paid against the budget. Now, the whole purpose of the project bank account is for us to track the use of the funding that has been provided. And for that, the only way to consistently do that is by using a cash basis of accounting. Because the bank statement, one can, and any accountant will tell you, and an accounting, by doing certain accruals, you can basically make it look exactly as you want it to. A bank statement is a definite way of ensuring that you're accounting for all money that's being spent, because you can't really do much with a bank statement, right? When you pay something, it goes on your bank statement. That is the normal process. So it's not like there can be any uncertainty whether the thing's been paid or not, or etc. Fact is, on the bank statement, it's easy. And we will then track those, allows us to track all income and expenditure for a particular project for any given period based on that. So, thanks, Terence.
Thanks for that, Nazim. There aren't any questions, but I think one that comes to mind is organizations that are partnering. How do they, reflect the different components that they are responsible for in the greater budget? How many PIMPs do they prepare? Just maybe give more guidance to guys that are coming in partnerships. How they can maybe work through formulating the ABC PIMP for that kind of program, and also cover guys who might be operating in multiple provinces, and there may be specific issues or nuances with provinces that they would want to reflect the per province costing separately to then feed into the main budget. So maybe just talk through those two structures.
So I will start by saying that your organization, by the time you even start the ABC program, you would have had a project model, a funding model for your project, right? Which you would then attempt to translate into the ABC program. Now, firstly, I want to encourage every applicant, if he has such a project model, to upload it in support of the ABC program, because there may be many assumptions, many breakdowns, as Terence was talking about, within that ABC, within that project budget, and assumptions, etc., that one does not see in the ABC. So that project funding model that you developed over time will be very useful in understanding what the ABC PIMP is all about and when certain numbers come from. Now, this ABC PIMP is obviously done at project level. So, for example, if we go to these costs, right? Let's look at training partners, right? In this case, Advantage had 2 training partners, which is 1.8 million in total, right? So it's 2,000 Rand. We're training 900 people at 2,000 Rand, 1.8 million. Okay? And we've gone and we said programs, and we've disaggregated that number into the various periods which we expect to actually fund that. Now, how then do we determine whether the first training partner and the second training partner, what relates to whom? Okay. Now, of course, that may or may not be contained in your project model. Providing us that gives us a sense of the breakdown of that training cost within your various project partners. Now, there's one of 2 ways that it can be incorporated. Okay. The first one is to do a PIMP for each of your project partners that is involved in the project. So your activities will be the same. You will simply cost where it relates to that particular project partner. You will then have this overall one, which is an aggregation of the individual PIMPs for each partner. I must be honest, I'm not necessarily keen on that because it creates a huge level of complication in the ABC PIMP. Because now, instead of doing 1, you've effectively got to do 3 or 4. Okay? What one can do, and I think this is the easier option, in addition to the project module, as I've said, is insert sheets. And you can insert anything that provides context to the standard ABC PIMP schedule. It's very useful to have them in one document so one doesn't have to refer. And as we refine this document, we are working on the sheets that actually informs the ABC PIMP, not on some model or some sheet that creates in isolation somewhere else. So we will have implementer 1, implementer 2. Okay. So for example, if it's training, we will break down the cost between implementer 1. Of course, we will do so by period 1, period 2, 3, 4, 5, and at the bottom there we will have it. Okay. And of course, this year has to be provided details. So if you're doing implementer 1, in period 1 is training 100 people at 2,000. So in other words, that period, that times that. So for period 1, the training cost is 200,000 to implement. Implemented 2, same story. So it's 50 at 2,000, and by no means do I assume that they're the same, right? Some might charge because the level of training and what the content is may be very different. First to say, if one assumes it is the same, it will be something like this. Then, if one then has a total training cost for period 1, we will go into cost, and there would be your 400,000. And listen, I'm using assumption numbers. In your costing sheet for that period, you will have training cost of 400,000. The assumption would be, please refer to the training or the breakdown of training cost per implementer, sheet number, training cost here. You simply say refer that sheet, which will then provide me the detail of. Terence, is that clear for you, or is there any further questions around that?
Yeah, I think that's clear. What I hear you saying is, sure, you are free to add tabs there, where you then show per implementer breakdown of costs, or per province if you really want to show the breakdown of the costs and the assumptions. And then in your activity outcome cost sheet, you just refer the reviewer to that sheet where you've done the breakdown.
Absolutely.
All right.
And I think people must not shy away, because the role is to make us understand, right, what's going on. Because you're the experts, you know. We don't necessarily know that. It's to make us understand the breakdown of the budget, how it is made up. Whatever you need to insert to support that role, please do so. Okay, and if you need to insert 5 sheets, then do so. Okay, but just reference it so we know what each sheet is actually the.
Yeah. All right. Thanks for that, Nazim. Colleagues, are there any questions for Nazim before we move to the next section? If there are, please pop them in the chat, and Nazim will respond as during the next section. So I just give you 30 seconds if there's a burning question in the chat related to completing the finance aspect of the ABC Pimp. Okay. Let's see here. I don't see any questions. Nazim, I think you're off the hook for now. Thank you very much for that segment. Colleagues, feel free to keep the questions coming if they should come on this section of the presentation, and we'll be more than happy to respond as best as we can. Here's something. Romeo is asking, why are the PowerPoints online not detailed like the ones you are presenting? Maybe I can ask Kath, do you want to respond to Romeo there? Kath, are you there?
Terence, may I jump in?
Go for it.
I'm wondering if is Romeo referring to the ABC Pimp that has been partially completed, or is he talking about the actual slides that are being presented? The ABC Pimp that is on the website for downloading is not completed. The one that we are seeing now and that the colleagues are going through now, that is an example that we have gone through as per the case study. Maybe he can also clarify. I hope that has answered it.
Romeo, are you covered? Okay. All right.
Terence, if I may add to that, if you don't mind.
Yeah, go for it.
I think one must be cognizant of the fact that this ABC Pimp that I've presented is based on a particular example. It is there to show a principle. Now, of course, your ABC Pimp or your project model may be very different, but the principle that we are trying to demonstrate still applies. So it's not about whether we've fully populated or not. We're trying to demonstrate the principle in completing the ABC. Thanks, David.
Sure. Thanks, Nazim. So Romeo, what I'm hearing Nazim say there is, yes, this information will be uploaded as well, Romeo. So you can access this segment as well. And then you compare as you work through the PIMP, you'll be referring to the video. And we are available as well if you want to just pick our brains on specific issues that your project may have on the ABC PIMP. Jabulile,
Terence,
the amount
sorry.
of, yeah.
Sorry, apologies. Just to also clarify, I think maybe to also help Romeo, colleagues, please make sure that you are referring to the right presentations that you've downloaded on the website. Remember, on the website, you would have the briefing session presentations. And today you have different presentations about the completion of the ABC PIMP. And Lerato will continue to share the link for those specific ones, and they will also be emailed to your email address that you've provided. So the first one was for the briefing sessions, and today is specifically for the training sessions which you were emailed.
All right, thanks for that, Mo. I just want to respond to Jabulile there. Yes, there's quite a bit of work to do, yes, please budget appropriately, Jabulile, because so that your project can get across the line. So we will also assist in that respect as well. If we see that there may be costs you are forgetting about, when we review that, we will communicate that to you and provide that level of assistance as well. All right, colleagues, keep the questions coming on the chat. We'll respond, but I want to allow my colleague Eldon and Monre to now go into a little bit more detail about the actual application form. If you're able, colleagues, maybe have the form open on your side as well, so you can play around with it as these guys are presenting. Over to you, Eldon and Monre.
Thank you, Terence. Colleagues, so we are going to just go through the process of accessing the online application form just one more time for those that have joined. In order for you to access the online application form, you have to access the Jobs Fund's website, which is www.jobsfund.org.za. And once you've located or once you've landed on the homepage of the Jobs Fund's website, there will be a clickable link that will allow you to it will indicate that there's more information around the interventions. I think we went through it in a little bit of detail, that when you land on this particular page, once you click that link, if you scroll down, this page is divided into two sections, one that's specifically related to the National Youth Service Program, and further down is for today's topic around the National Pathway Management Network Innovation Fund. In light of this particular section, like Terence has indicated and Moketi has indicated, is that we will upload the video segments for this session that you will then be able to refer to. And then once again, colleagues, I encourage you to download the term sheet as well as the application user guide, which would be a step-by-step instruction on how to complete the various elements of the online application via our online portal. Again, the last document that is available for download, which is also of significance, is the frequently asked questions user guide, which is updated constantly based on queries that we've been receiving through the help desk, as well as through the briefing sessions that took place last week. Most importantly is that there's an apply here button, and that button needs to be clicked, and you'll be redirected to our online portal. So I'm just going to highlight that on this particular page, that if you haven't done so already, you would need to register. There's a clickable hyperlink that says click here to register now, where you would put in pertinent details such as your name and surname and email address. There's a check digit validation. And once you've completed this step, would you then receive an email that would contain your username and login details. Once you've received that username and login details, you are then able to enter in your username as well as your temporary password that will then take you into the online application, the online portal, and you will then access the home page. I think the key points around this particular page is that we encourage our applicants and users to change their password as soon as they've logged in. It's just, good practice to do that. And then in addition to that is that you need to ensure that all users that will access your application, those that will be assisting, whether you're in a team and so forth, to complete this application form, that they also have their own login details. I'll take you through a portion of or a section of the application where I'll show you how to actually complete this particular step. In light of what else we see in this particular space here is the ability for you to create a new application. There's a green plus button, which most of you have now encountered, that if you click on this, you go through a pre-registration page where you would put in details such as your project name, where your head office is going to be based, and your institution type. Once you've completed that process, you will receive a pop-up message. So it's very important that you ensure that your pop-up blocker is turned off, so that you are able to see these pop-up messages from time to time. And what that pop-up message at that time, when you've completed that pre-registration page, you will receive a reference number, which would be an auto-generated email will be sent to you. Please ensure that you use that reference number should you have any queries around your application, whether it's the online application or any other further details, so that we are able to attend to your specific needs as quickly as possible. Once you've completed the pre-registration page, there's a declaration that you complete before you land onto the eligibility tab. And I think that we've said a lot around the eligibility tab. We've gone through it in a little bit of detail, but Mondre, if you can just give us a quick run through one more time.
Thank you, Alvin. Good afternoon, participants. So on the eligibility tab, we have 11 questions that each applicant will have to answer. If you go down to the bottom of the eligibility tab, we have made a note stating that applications must meet the above eligibility criteria in order to proceed to the next section. What this means is that should you answer no to any of the 11 questions, then you are ineligible and you will not be able to proceed to complete the application form. You will also receive an auto-generated letter indicating that you are ineligible. However, if you say yes to all the 11 questions, it means you are eligible and you can now proceed to complete the rest of the application form. Thank you, Alvin.
Thanks, Mandre. So I'm just going to go into the institutional information tab now, Mandre. Maybe you can explain around the key sort of sections around the institutional information tab, and then I'll come in around some of the key system features.
So under the institutional information tab, this tab is broken down into contact details of partners, why we want the contact details of the partners. We want to get an idea in terms of where you are, where you're based, where your offices are, and should we need to engage you, at least we will have contact details or email addresses where we can engage you guys, all of you. Then also it's about track record. Remember, one of the eligibility criteria is that all applicants need to demonstrate track record of at least 3 years. Under the institutional tab, we're also going to look at budgetary requirements. And then very importantly, we're also going to look at uploads that all applicants need to submit. I'm going to hand over to Alden, who will now highlight some key system features.
Thanks,
Alden, as you do that, maybe just say a little bit more about what this pop-up blogger is and how one disables it. Thank you.
Okay. So thanks for that question, Terence. So with regards to pop-up blockers on most web browsers, is that if there is a pop-up blocker that is initiated from a particular website, you'll see on the top right-hand side of your web browser, normally where the URL would be, there would be a little bit of a message that you would then click on, and that will allow you to, it will give you a couple of options to say, don't ever accept pop-ups from this particular site, or always allow pop-ups from this particular site. And that's essentially how you would ensure that your pop-up blocker is turned off for this particular application. In particular, it works well with regards to Google, Firefox. Those messages would pop up to say, for lack of a better word, to inform you that the site is requesting a pop-up to come up. Do you want to allow it? And that's essentially what you would do, Terence, to ensure that you are able to see those pop-ups. If you are a little bit more old school and using the likes of Internet Explorer, on the top right-hand side, there is a button that says Tools. And if you click on Tools, essentially you would see that it would allow you to look at things in compatibility view. You need to ensure that your compatibility view is turned off for this particular site, and that will also further allow the pop-ups to be enabled for the site. I hope that answers the question around that particular point. Then, as going back to what Mandre alluded to in terms of system features for this particular section here, is that what you'll notice is that when you register the application for the first time, you would then be nominated as the main contact of the intervention or project. So in most cases, we also have found that the person that's actually registering the application is not necessarily not necessarily the main contact. And I'll show you how to actually complete the step of changing the main contact and adding more users that will assist you to complete the application form. Right? With the main contact, there's obviously certain details that are still outstanding. And very important to note is that there are red asterisks that are being populated across the application form. What that red asterisk represents is that field or that section is a mandatory requirement. So you have to complete the various details or the fields within that particular section. Now, how do we add colleagues to or further users to assist you with completing your application form? As I assume that you might have a team that is willing to assist with completing this process to speed up the ability for you to complete the application form. There's a section just under the lead applicant's main contact person section that talks to adding colleagues with online access. So this here there's a button that you click to say add colleagues. You would put in your colleague's email address. If the colleague has registered previously, you'll get a note that will say that this person has registered previously. Alternatively, you would have to confirm the details of that individual and basically populate details such as the title, name, the person's designation, and very importantly is the role that that individual will be playing. Once you've added the colleague to the application form, that person would now have access to assist you with completing various sections of the application form. You'll note now that there's a second button that's come up that's available, and should you have a requirement for someone else to be nominated as the main contact, because the other reason why the main contact is very, I suppose, critical in this sense is that through the communication that gets sent via the system, the auto-generated emails is specifically sent to the main contact of this online application. But by clicking the Nominate Lead Contacts button, you'll see that you'll have the ability to actually nominate a new main contact by selecting whichever applicable user that you've added, and then save it. And then what will happen is that person would then be displayed as the main contact for the project. I think that what's also important is that if you've downloaded the user guide, you would be able to find this particular section of the user guide on how to add additional users to assist with the application process on page 14 of the user guide. And that would also just give you that step-by-step with screenshots on how you would then complete that particular section. Mondre, I'm moving over onto the Partners tab.
There's just a comment there, Alden, or Monre rather, on eligibility from Jabulile. He's asking for a bit of clarity on one of the questions there. Question 1.2. He's asking you guys to maybe clarify question 1.2 is not for NPOs.
Thank you, Terence. Okay.
Thanks, Mondre. Yes. Question 1.2, which relates to registration with the Department of Employment and Labour, refers to for-profit entities only, does not apply to NPOs. So in that case, you would select the not applicable button, or the switch, the not applicable switch, and then you should. If you're an NPO, that question does not apply to you. Thank you.
Is the participant covered, Terence? I'm sorry, I can't see the chat.
All right. No, I'm sure Jablile is responding. Then Umar says, please move below to upload section and explain. Let's just see which section. Oh, that one there. I think he just needs just a few sentences on that section, colleagues. Thanks, Umar. Jablile, are you covered there? Jablile is covered. Let's move on to Umar's comment. Thanks.
I'm not sure what is the specific questions around the uploads. Maybe Mondre can come in, but what we've basically done is through the application form, there are various sections that require inputs, and especially around your background and so forth. You know, how long is, as an example, how long has your institution been in operation for? So in light of providing a motivation and evidence of how long your organization has been in operation for, we have supplied an applicable text box that will allow you to upload the evidence to prove how long you've been in operation for. So these would be certificates or proof of registration. And we've also given some guidance in terms of what sort of some help text in terms of the sort of information that you would be required to upload at that stage. Likewise, for audited financial statements. There's a question in the application form around, do you have audited financial statements? If you do have audited financial statements, you would then upload it into that relevant section there. Because what we've also done is, through the process of eligibility, this would also be one way of proving that you are, truly eligible, by providing the supporting information through the means of an upload. I'm not sure, Terence, does that cover the question? Does Mandre need to come in and answer a few add in addition to what I've just described? Or is the user covered, participant covered?
Alden, I think
Umar, is your yes, I'm covered. Just checking. I had asked maybe if you had a specific question to just post it. So we move to Romeo. Romeo is a separate question as well. Umar, is your just a second yes if you are covered? All right, great. Umar's covered. There's a question there from Romeo around whether an applicant has to upload a separate detailed project plan, or they can just input their initiative on the GMS as it is.
All right, so I think for me to answer that question is that a lot of the organizations or applicants that would apply through our rounds, in some cases, have documentation that's already prepared. And what would be, what those individuals would be able to do is read through those specific questions. And if it matches to what is being prepared already, you are able to then copy and paste from your completed documentation onto the system. So you are able to transpose information, whether it's a PDF document or Word document, onto the system already. I do caution, however, with regards to that, to ensure that you read through each of the help text or the guiding text that's been provided for each of the questions, because in some cases you may need to alter that information that has been prepared already to talk or be specific to the relevant question that's been asked through the help text for each of the sections. I'm not sure if that is clear enough, Terence. Does that help, Romeo?
Romeo is covered as well. Thanks, colleagues.
Yeah. Maybe what I can also say, Terence, is that a lot of the information here is, we've got a lot of information in terms of requests from partners, but it doesn't stop partners from adding more information. What we do request is that there is a separate uploads tab that we'll get through as part of the last part of the segment. But if there's additional information that you do want to share, maybe the word limit of a particular text box doesn't allow you to articulate everything, we do encourage you to reference that particular document and then upload it into the upload section. That also is a useful way of us trying to further find information that you've been provided as part of your application. But thank you for that. I'm moving to the partners tab here. So what we have is we have a process, and we've been speaking about it in the chats in terms of adding partners and collaboration. And this is a feature that will allow our applicants to add implementing partners to the application form. This is a simple table feature that's available. And you are able to add multiple partners, obviously noting that with each partner that you add, there is specific questions that you would then have to answer for each of the partners. So the more partners that you add, obviously the more you would then have to complete those various sections for each of the various partners. When adding a partner, you would add the partner name, the type of contribution, whether it's financial, technical, or both. We also have the partner's institution type, as well as for you to provide a brief description of the role that this partner would then play as part of this project or intervention. What will happen is once you've added the partner, all your partners will then be displayed in a little bit of a grid. And in order for you to navigate to each of the partners, we have the ability for you to select each partner. There's a little magnifying glass icon. And once you've clicked on that icon, it will then open up the relevant sections that will need to be completed for each implementing partner that you add onto the application form. Mondre, maybe you can say a few words about the various sections that's required for completing this section.
Yeah. As indicated before, we would like to have some contactable information about the various partners where we can engage them to clarify certain matters. So it's always good to have like a phone number or an email address that will actually allow us to communicate with the various partners. Okay. I also would like to add, when it comes to the mandatory documents that need to be uploaded, we have made it a bit easier for you. In the body of the tab, we would indicate that, for example, how long has your institution been in operation? And then we say, kindly upload your registration documents. Upload one below. Eldon, if you can just scroll down. And you will see that upload one under the uploads tab relate to the registration documents that we require. So whenever we have in the body of the tab an upload requirement, you will find the corresponding upload number under the uploads tab. Thank you, Eldon.
Thanks, Mondre. I think I just want to add at this stage here too that in the user guide, this portion of the process can be found under page 19 of the user guide, again detailing the step-by-step instructions on how to complete it. Before I move on to the next tab, there's a few system features that I just want to outline. So to again assist our applicants with trying to complete all of those mandatory fields, which I've basically advised that this red star or asterisk that you see across the various fields, to identify those across the application and on the actual tab that you are busy with. What we have built in is two different types of validations. The first validation is an on-screen validation. So basically, if you click the save button, what will happen is the system would then identify all of the fields that are still required to be completed when encountering a particular tab on the system. So this will allow you to, or guide you as the applicant to go to that particular section and complete the necessary details. The second validation process that we have built into the system is one that covers the entire application. So the one that I've just demonstrated now is strictly just for the particular screen. When you click save, the mandatory fields that are not complete will be flagged. However, we do have a feature called validate, right? This is a very important feature because, as I alluded to, you could have multiple people that have been assigned to the various tabs to complete. And if you are the sort of central person to coordinate the inputs via the individuals that are assisting you, you are then able to use this validate button that will run through the entire application and identify all of the mandatory fields that are still required to be completed. If all of those fields are completed, as you can see, we have completed the eligibility tab in fullness. That is now marked as green, but you'll note that there's still the other 9 tabs to be completed. So that's also a very important feature that we have as part of our system. The last point that I just want to talk to is that at the bottom, we have next and previous buttons. And essentially what this will do is it will take you to the next section or the next tab of the application form. And what it will also do is it will also initiate a save process. But we do encourage our applicants to save our work continuously as part of a method to try and ensure that we have this completed or facilitated, is that we do have a timeout session that's active on the system. And that's why it's important to have that pop-up blocker turned on. Because if the session expires, a pop-up will come out to say, your session is about to expire. Do you want to continue? And by clicking OK, we'll then refresh the screen. It's also a little bit of a security feature in the sense that if you walk away from your desk, nobody else can then access your details once the timeout period has lapsed.
Question, Eldon, around partners. There's a comment there. If I don't have partners, can I move to the next section without having to fill in anything in this section?
100% correct. You don't have to complete this. This is just enabled for those initiatives or projects that do have partners that will be assisting with this particular intervention. However, if you do not have a partner, you are then able to then move on to the next section. I hope that covers that question, Terence.
Thanks. I think that should cover it.
Right, great. Monroe, I'm going on to the governance and implementation structure tab. Maybe you want to say a few bits of information around this tab.
Yeah, thanks, Alden. So the governance tab is broken down into 4 sections, and that includes your institutional arrangements for implementing this initiative, key staff personnel, system requirements, and also then again, uploads. So when you're completing the governance tab, we would like applicants to indicate to us who the lead applicant is. Then we want applicants to focus on the relationships between the various partners. We also want to see the roles and the responsibilities and or contributions from each of these partners. For example, we want to see who will be responsible for decision making and what are the procedures that will govern this decision making process. On the key staff, remember, applicants will have to demonstrate that they have sufficient capacity to implement this initiative. So under this tab, we would like applicants to give us an indication of at least the following positions that will be responsible for implementing the project. That would include who the project manager is, who will be responsible for finance on this initiative, and who would be responsible for monitoring, evaluation, and reporting. I'm going to hand over to Alden to take you through how to add a staff member on the online portal.
Thanks, Mondre. I think it's quite straightforward in the sense of it's a table feature that's available to add a staff member. You would add simply the name, surname, the role of that individual. As alluded to by Mondre, at a minimum, these are the 3 resources that we are looking for to ensure that we have as part of this particular project. The responsibility, the organization that you would see here would pull through from the organization that you would have captured as part of the pre-registration page, as well as if you've added any partners, maybe this particular individual's role might be from seconded from one of the partners that you are going to be dealing with. If it's someone that's not part of your institution or partner, we do have another option. You would give a brief description of the qualifications as well as the description of the experience, and we do have an add button that is available for you to then click, and it will add it to the table view as you would see it here. It's important with regards to this particular feature because this information would then pull through onto the risk tab, which we'll demonstrate shortly. So it's critical that you complete this tab, especially in light of the 3 resources that we are requiring you to input as part of this initiative. It's also important to note again that you would have to upload CVs, and we've made a section of the uploads available for you to upload those CVs onto the system. And then again, just in terms of the user guide, you would be able to find this particular section on how to add these staff members to the table on page 24 of the user guide. Terence, I'm not sure if there's any questions, or can I move on to the next tab?
No, I think You can move on. Wait, let's just have a see here. No, that's fine. All right, Janice, I hope you got the documents. You guys, I think you can proceed. Lerato is helping Janice out.
Okay, thank you. Monroe, so we are on the initiative description tab.
Thank you, Alden. So here we get to the gist of your initiative. This is where you're going to describe to us what your initiative is all about. So here we want applicants to tell us more about the proposed initiative, where the initiative is going to take place, which geographical areas, which sectors the initiative is targeting, why these particular sectors, okay? We also want to get an idea in terms of how this initiative will improve the ability of young people to access to opportunities, how the initiative will resolve the systemic barriers preventing our youth from employment opportunities or income opportunities. We also want to get an idea of who the beneficiaries are that you're targeting, what skills will be developed for these beneficiaries, why these particular skills, okay? For example, it could be, if we look at the digital and the technology sector, there's a huge demand for Salesforce or any other IT languages, and you have partnered with various organizations that actually demonstrated the demand, and they want you as the applicant to come on board as a partner to develop these skills so that after the youth have been trained in these skills, they will be employment ready, and these partners will then provide employment opportunities for the youth. That's the kind of information that we want under the initiative description tab. Thank you, Alden.
All right, thanks, Monroe. And I think that in answering, I think it was Romeo's question. Sorry, I got a frog in my throat. In answering Romeo's question, I did allude to the fact that if you'll note that on the various sections of the application, especially where there's a field where narrative needs to be completed, you just need to note that there is a maximum amount of words that can be completed in a particular section. So as soon as you start typing, you'll note that the word count will then be displayed on at the bottom of that particular control. I think that this is also the portion of where I was trying to explain that if you have a document that already exists, that clearly outlines and defines this, your description of your innovation in light of this particular intervention, you are then able to copy and paste it into this section. And if the words not allow for all of that to be copied and pasted into this particular field, you can then refer to the document that you would then upload via the Uploads tab to support any further information that you want to describe. Monroe, we're now going on to the Budget tab.
Thank you, Alden. So Nazim has taken the participants through the process of how to complete the ABC Pimp, the finance section of that. So we're not going to go into much detail. We just want to remind you guys in terms of what we want to see under the Budget tab. So it's a requirement that you provide us a summary of your budget, indicating to us, where the funds will come from, what your costs are, how you're going to pay for these costs, what the key cost drivers are, etc. So I think just the tip, if you want to complete the Budget tab, it will be good to start with the ABC Pimp, because in the ABC Pimp, you would be in a position to use assumptions to get to applicable cost, and then you can just total that and copy that information onto the Budget tab. We're also looking here for match funding. If you, where you have to provide match funding, whether you already have the match funding or you're waiting on a decision from a government department or a private sector organization for the match funding, we would like you to indicate to us the status of your match funding. Okay, then under the budget line items, this is really a mirror of what you're going to be doing in your ABC Pimp. And as indicated before, you would be in the position just to copy that information into the budget line item. Then also when it comes to key project costs, we're looking at, if it's, for example, a support for work seekers project where you're going to train and place individuals, then we expect to see that training and stipends are some of the key project cost drivers in your application. Thank you, Alvin.
Thanks, Mondre. I think that the other point of importance here on this particular tab is that your ABC Pimp, the completed version, would then be uploaded on this particular tab of the online application.
Alden,
yes?
can we just quickly go back and maybe you can just share some light on the sources of funding section of the budget tab for the participants?
All right, thanks, Mondre. So with regards to the sources of funding tabs, this would be in light of if you have funding partners that would be contributing towards the intervention and essentially to match funding. You have the ability to add those partners onto this section. And then again, it will tally up to the details that you would have inputted onto your ABC Pimp. This section here would be described further on page 29 of the user guide. But I think what's important to note is that if you had selected your partner type as financial, now I just want to show you the example here quickly. If the partner's contribution was financial, so you remember if you had the ability to choose financial, technical, and financial and technical, if it was financial, what would happen is the system will basically pre-populate this section here, and simply you would just be adding in the description of the source and use of those funds from those resources and the value that's going to be contributed. If there are more partners that you haven't captured as part of that partners tab, you would simply just have the ability to add the partner, the description, and the amount, and there's an add button that you would then be able to execute in order to add it to the table that you see listed over here at the top. I'm not sure if there's any questions, Terence. I can't see the chat, but I'll move on to the indicators tab. Mondre, let's just pause for a second just to see if there's any questions.
Yeah, there was a question regarding match funding. I think Nazim has covered it, but I think it's worth flagging to colleagues who may be applying in the two programs that for this one, match funding is a requirement. Colleagues, the National Youth Service Program one is the one that does not have a prerequisite to have match funding. So I think that's just something to just flag to the colleagues who may be submitting two applications, one in the other program as well. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Terence. Right, Mondre, so we're on the indicators tab.
Thank you, Alden. So Moketi took the participants through the ABC Pimp activities for the monitoring evaluation section earlier. So I'm just going to highlight a few issues relating to how you're going to complete the indicators tab on the online portal. So by now we know that we have 6 main program indicators. For each of these indicators, you will have to provide us with assumptions that you've used to actually get to a proposed target. For example, if you indicate that you're going to register 500 youth on this initiative, we want to get an idea in terms of on what that the assumptions that number is based on. Again, when completing the ABC Pimp, you also need to provide assumptions there. So it will be good to complete the ABC Pimp and that then transfer that information onto the online portal under the main indicator section. We also want to get an idea in terms of how you're going to collect data for this initiative. Again, I want to remind all applicants that it is a requirement and eligibility criteria that all applicants should demonstrate a track record of at least 3 years to indicate to us that you have the capacity to implement this project. Under initiative specific indicators, you will see we have our main indicators, and then we also have initiative specific indicators. And the initiative specific indicators will differ from project to project. Okay, in some instances, you would have an initiative specific indicator would include that, you know, throughout the implementation period, you're going to partner with 15 partners, as those partners will in a position to assist you in creating those employment opportunities for the youth. Another applicant might have in the agri value chain, 15 offtake agreements will be negotiated with organizations such as Pick and Pay, Woolworths, etc., to provide an opportunity for you to create those employment opportunities within your different initiatives. So again, the initiative specific indicators is specific to each applicant. Thank you, Alden.
All right, thanks, Mandre. Again, I just want to indicate here that in light of the main indicators and the first 3 rows of the project initiative specific indicators are mandatory. And if for any other reason that a particular section is not applicable to you, we would encourage you to actually type in not applicable into the various text boxes. It might not necessarily relate to the indicator section, but in light of any of the other sort of questions that gets asked, if it's not applicable, please indicate that accordingly. Mandre, I'm now moving on to the impact tab.
Thank you, Alden. So in line with the Challenge Fund principles, and as indicated before, we will be running a competitive approach. We're using various impact criteria to assess the merits of the application. And for the Innovation Fund, we have 5 of, we'll be assessing each applicant against 5 impact criteria. And the first one relates to the initiative's alignment to the National Pathway Management Network principles. The second one relates to the applicant's capacity to implement, whether the applicant has got the sufficient and adequate systems in place to track beneficiaries, to engage other partners. The third one relates to capacity scale. We would like to partner with organizations that can demonstrate that after this intervention, they will be in a position to scale this initiative and create more opportunities for the youth. Then we also have contribution to systemic change and sustainability. And the last one then, innovation. Alden, just a reminder that on the application form and under this tab, we have specific questions that we would like applicants to address to assist us in fairly appraising each and every applicant. Thank you very much.
All right, thanks, Mandre. We can move on to the rest tab.
Now, we know that we all have implemented projects before, and from the onset, we would hope that things would always go according to plan, but we know that never happens. There's always an event that occurs that might have a negative impact on the project, whether it's not meeting your deliverables or outcomes, or other parties to the project withdrawing from the initiative, and then projects struggle to actually get to their intended outcomes. So under the risk and mitigation tab, we would like applicants to again, identify and prioritize potential risks that might have a negative impact on the project. If I can just use an example again, if it's an agri-value chain project, we have agreements or potential offtakes from Pick n Pay or Woolworths that's going to provide supply opportunities for emerging farmers. And then 6 months or a year into the project, there's some issues between the partnership, and then that contract is no longer valid anymore, or the organization doesn't want to work with a partner any longer, and that is something that is definitely going to have an impact on the project. So we want all applicants to identify those potential risks, explain to us what the potential impact would be on the identified risks, and then also indicate to us as an applicant how you are going to eliminate that risk from occurring. If you cannot eliminate the risk from occurring, how are you going to ensure that you mitigate that risk in a way that the severity wouldn't be that much on the initiative. Thank you, Alvin.
All right, thank you, Mondre. I think that the other important point that I just want to point out is that this drop-down list for responsibility for mitigation actions, this information is pulled from the key staff table, which we demonstrated on the governance tab. So if I can just take you back quickly one section, this role that is populated over here, and as you add the finance person, M&E, and whatever other role, training, board member, project advisor, oversight, once you add those key staff members, it will then populate this particular section here, because then we'll know that for those particular risks, this particular role within the project would be addressing and be responsible for those mitigation actions. The last one, Mondre, is the Uploads tab.
Yes, so just to remind the participants again that under each tab, we are requesting the participant or applicant to upload specific documentation relating to information required under that particular tab. We also have an upload documents tab where documents that we did not request under each specific tab, we are providing the opportunity for applicants to upload those documents under the uploads tab. Alden, over to you.
There's a question for you linked to that, or suggestion from Beverly there. She's highlighting, I think, tab number 1, whether we should rather increase the words so that we don't have too many more uploads, as a suggestion. Maybe just share some thinking behind why the limited words, what the rationale was that for, in the way that we set up the application form.
Thanks for that question, Terence. I think that in terms of the way that we set up the application form, we wanted to make sure that in light of all of the questions that we're asking, is that we would get the most clear and concise inputs from our applicants. And one of the ways, which obviously what Beverly is alluding to here, is that one of the other ways that we thought that, well, what happens if someone does have more to say than 1,000 words, as an example? Then what we would then suggest, and what we're suggesting through this process, Terence, is that you do allude that there is an additional document that gives you more information other than what's required of you for that specific question. And it's available in the upload section. And within the upload section, we do have a point here that says any other supporting documents. But we really want to look at a focused approach towards the questions. And by doing so, we wanted to ensure that, based on our experience of running funding rounds as the Jobs Fund, what is the sort of word limit that we would look at to get a clear and crisp, concise input from our applicants. I don't know if that assists students. I'm not sure, Mondre, if you want to add anything further.
Thanks, I'm fine, Elvis.
All right, I think Beverly will let us know in the chat if she is covered.
Sure, but we do acknowledge that. Thanks, Beverly. The other thing that I just want to point out before I conclude is that there are certain file types that you are able to upload on our system. If you don't upload it in these specific file types, an error message will then be popped up onto that specific section. A very important aspect to note is the file size that can be uploaded onto the system. Is that the file size is a maximum of 10 megabytes per file. So you are able to upload multiple documents into a particular section as long as it does not exceed 10 megabytes. Another point to emphasize is that if an upload is mandatory and for some other reason is not applicable to your intervention or to your project, that you upload on your letterhead a signed letter stating the reason why that particular upload is not applicable to you. It's important because this is quite a common one that maybe trips people up at the last minute when they're submitting their application. So we do encourage people that if something is not applicable to you, like I've indicated in terms of the various sections, that you would then articulate that into the various text boxes. And if a mandatory upload is not applicable to you, that you then upload a signed letter indicating why it's not applicable to you. Then in wrapping up with regards to the remainder features of the system, again, I do want to encourage our participants here today. On the right-hand side, there's a downloads feature that I demonstrated on how to download the ABC Pimp, but the other downloads that are available here too, which is the due diligence checklist, the standardized grant agreements for the various entities types, the user guide, which is, I can't emphasize more, please download that. So if you take away anything from from Mondre and our segment, please download that user guide, because it will give you a step-by-step instruction on how to complete all of these different tabs. The very last point that I want to make is that we do have the ability to print out, or you have the ability to print out a read-only view of your application form. It's a simple click, and then you are able to then print it out should you require it. You might need to save it and give it over to someone for proofreading, but the feature is available. We do have a terms and conditions section that needs to be accepted as part of the submission process. So we do encourage our participants to please ensure that you read through the terms and conditions before accepting it, and then obviously before you submit your application. The validate button I did indicate is something that will be utilized to have a final run through to ensure that all of the mandatory fields have now been completed or attended to, and it is a mandatory requirement for you to validate your application before you can submit the application through to the fund manager. What will happen is once you've validated you'll be redirected to submit your application, and once you've submitted your application form, you will then receive a confirmation message from the system that your application has been successfully submitted through to the fund manager. If for some or other reason you need to make a quick amendment, you are able to unsubmit as long as it's before the closing date of the 25th of November at 3 o'clock. But please be sure that if you unsubmit, that you resubmit, you go through the validation process again and submit your application, so that you will receive that email again to confirm that your application has been resubmitted. Terence, I will pause here. I'm not sure if there's any further questions. I don't see any on the chat.